Close to midnight on February 13, 1950, the radio operators at Offutt Air Force Base received a disturbing distress call that would be the first of its kind. A B-36 bomber carrying a Mark IV nuclear bomb off the coast of British Columbia, close to the Alaskan border, was going down. It would be America's first ever broken arrow incident, an accident in which custody of a nuclear weapon is lost, and in this case, it was never found. Led by Captain Harold L. Barry, with support from First Lieutenant Ray Whitfield as co-pilot, the Convair B-36, serial number 44-92075, landed at Eielson Air Force Base by Fairbanks in Alaska, with plans to conduct a simulated nuclear strike against the Soviet Union. The extreme cold forced them to keep the engine running. According to a crew member who requested to remain anonymous, in an interview with author and B-36 expert Don Pyatt, quote, "If the engine stopped, the oil would solidify." The freezing weather of -40 degrees, both Celsius and Fahrenheit, not only complicated the landing, it may have also led to the aircraft's later troubles. A crew of 17 boarded the aircraft, with 5 of them intended for at least one relief shift on the long training flight. 2 crew members, a weaponeer and the bomb commander, were tasked with handling the atomic bomb on board. The bomb commander was usually a colonel, but in this case Lieutenant Colonel Daniel McDonald's, who was also serving as an observer, took over the position. It's been suggested that the weapon on board would be armed during the simulation, explaining his presence instead of a regular bomb commander. The exact goals of this exercise are still closely guarded, with the details of the intended test for the nuclear weapon on board remaining unclear. It's been speculated that part of this test was to arm the bomb in flight and to test possible defense maneuvers. What is known is that the flight from Eielson in Alaska to the home base in Fort Worth, Texas, was intended to take between 16 and 24 hours, for which the aircraft was fully fueled. It could even have flown for up to 28 hours. At takeoff, the crew experienced minor complications due to the weather, but nothing sufficient to detract them from their mission. The B-36 departed with 252 pounds of ammunition for its cannons, aside from the much more significant Mark IV fission bomb. The Mark IV bomb aboard the B-36 number 075 was an implosion-type nuclear weapon design based on the Mark III Fat Man, which was infamously used to bomb Nagasaki at the end of World War II. The Mark III needed each component to be individually assembled by hand, which meant that highly controlled conditions and intensely trained technicians were needed to prepare it. On the other hand, the Mark IV was more practical, with a battery and electrical systems that could be monitored from a bomber before it was targeted and deployed. The bomb measured 128 inches, or 3.3 meters long, by 60 inches, or 1.5 meters wide. It weighed a little over 10,800 pounds, or 4,900 kilograms. It was the first nuclear weapon to use a levitated pit implosion, where the pit could be removed and stored in a separate container called the birdcage. The in-flight insertion of the core procedure, also known as IFI, had only been carried out on the ground at the time. A possible goal of testing it in the air can be deduced from the anonymous crew member's comment to author and B-36 expert Don Pyatt, quote, "A real, fully functional bomb that used lead for the core instead of plutonium. Without a real bomb, the support systems could not be tested. There were some dummy bombs made of concrete that were used for load testing, but we weren't carrying one of those. This mission was to be as real as it gets, short of war." Reaffirming the claims of his statement, the military has said that the bomb contained lead, uranium, and TNT, but lacked the plutonium core. It's been assumed that there was no real core on board the B-36, but such an assessment could not be confirmed without physical evidence. The stated intention of the flight in 1950 was to perfect operational procedures, and it was denominated as a, quote, developmental flight. The path intended for the Convair B-36 flight was to fly west over the Pacific Ocean from southeast Alaska, passing over British Columbia, then to shift inland, passing over Washington State. The plan was to then have the aircraft climb to 40,000 feet, to simulate a bomb run over San Francisco, where all the tasks needed to bomb the city would supposedly be completed, except for actually bombing it. After the simulation, the plane would land at Carswell Air Force Base in Fort Worth, Texas. However, the plane never made it beyond Alaska. Upon takeoff, ice began building up on the airplane's exterior, adding to the difficulty of piloting it under the terrible winter weather conditions. The captain turned the engines to full power in order to keep the aircraft flying. The unnamed crew member recalled the moment in his interview with Don Pyatt, quote, "The flight engineer started reporting problems with the fuel mixtures in the engines. It was starting to run full rich. Any attempt to lean them above idle cutoff would fail. We then started experiencing multiple failures and none of them could be corrected. Then when the fires started in the engines, we knew we had to make plans for leaving the aircraft." 3 engines, half of the 6 that powered the aircraft, were on fire. Captain Harold L. Barry recalled the last few minutes on the B-36 when speaking to the Air Force Board of Inquiry, stating, quote, "The engineer gave me emergency power to try to hold our altitude. We still descended quite rapidly, and by the time we got over land, we were at 5,000 feet. So I rang the alarm bell and told them to leave." In order to protect American nuclear secrets, the crew first jettisoned the Mark IV bomb, setting a timer to detonate it in midair, armed with only a lead core. Some of the crew members reported seeing it explode in the air, while others could not provide similar confirmation. It was the United States' very first broken arrow incident. After the crew parachuted out of the plane, Strategic Air Command almost immediately contacted the Royal Canadian Air Force to rescue them. Operation BRICS was able to locate 12 of the 17 crew members. The nuclear nature of the mission was not shared with the Canadian government. An investigation into the B-36 crash revealed that the main culprit had been ice on the carburetors. In most planes, these are placed next to the engines so that the hot air flowing from the engines will keep them warm under cold conditions. The B-36, however, had rear-facing engines with carburetors facing the front that exposed them to the outside temperature. Additionally, the carburetors each had 2 chambers for incoming air, which then fed 2 distinct sections of each carburetor. The baffle plates separating these sections for pressure balance had an opening that became most likely coated in ice, causing both halves to run rich on fuel, in turn loading the exhaust with raw fuel, which caused the fires. Three weeks before the B-36 crash, a Douglas C-54 had disappeared in the same area, and operations were already being conducted to locate it, along with its missing crew. The U.S. redirected members of the search party to instead look for the B-36, and more importantly, its jettison payload. The search bore no fruit, and was not extended to be more exhaustive, as the aircraft was believed to be lost in the bottom of the ocean. 3 years would pass before a Royal Canadian Air Force flight spotted the B-36 wreckage on Mount Colleget in the Smithers region, 50 miles or more to the east of the border with Alaska and the towns of British Columbia, Stewart, and Hyder. The U.S. Air Force launched an investigation, sending a team to trek to the site in September of 1953. Their 19-day excursion up the mountain was unsuccessful, and another team was sent in 1954 with a local guide and better climbing equipment. This time, the team succeeded. They took crucial components from the wreckage and blew up the parts of it that were visible above the snow. 2 civilians later happened upon the remains of the plane in 1956 and recorded the location of the wreck, which was otherwise kept a secret for 40 years. Reports claim that locals who knew about the crash site were sworn to secrecy, particularly the guide assisting the 1954 expedition. Residents were not informed about the special cargo that had been aboard the plane, nor were they told that they were in any immediate danger. Rumors circulated that a skeleton had been found in the wrecked aircraft, but no such rumor has ever been confirmed. In 1997, 2 simultaneous expeditions were launched with the civilian recorded coordinates. One expedition was Canadian and the other American. Upon reaching the wreck, the Canadian expedition conducted radiation and environmental analysis of the site and reported that the radiation level was normal and not a cause for worry. The Americans, who also reached the site, did not share their conclusions. Diver Sean Smirchinski was looking for sea cucumbers when he located a metal device in waters offshore from British Columbia. He described the item to the BBC as being, quote, bigger than a king-size bed. He recounted it as having a round bottom, a flat top, and a hole in the center, which would match aspect of a Mark IV, with the hole as a possible effective detonation. Locals suggested that it could be the lost nuke of the 1950 B-36 crash. The Canadian Department of National Defense responded to the claim by launching an investigation into the area, reported as being near Haida Gwaii. However, the location of this metallic device was actually near Pitt Island within the Inside Passage, which did not match with the flight path of the doomed aircraft. This crucial detail revealed that it was unlikely to be the long-searched-for nuclear weapon. Aviation historian Dirk Scepter has stated that, quote, whatever he found, it's not the nuke. The U.S. military later confirmed that the find was not related to the 1950 crash. Secrecy, mystery, and the destruction of evidence have clouded public awareness of the first broken arrow. Experts and academics still question multiple public details. The aircraft apparently flew for more than 200 miles before crashing, something that would be almost impossible in bad weather without a pilot. The B-36 crew abandoned the plane reportedly at 3,000 feet, but the wreckage was found at 6,000 feet. Furthermore, the plane was heading southwest on autopilot, but was found inland as if it flew northeast. These questions will linger, as those involved have either passed away or are unwilling to resolve them. As for the Mark IV bomb, the core is said to still be in the hands of the Atomic Energy Commission or the Pentagon. It remains unconfirmed whether or not the nuclear weapon was destroyed during the incident. Pieces, or perhaps all of it, may be resting at the bottom of the ocean in an unknown location. Whether the partial or complete nuclear device will ever be found remains to be seen.